Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual event space. So my name is Allie, and I'm your host for this evening. And I am so excited to be introducing TJ Klune and Seanan McGuire here to discuss the house in the Cerulean Sea. So tonight's conversation is part of our annual Third Place Books Read program. Shoreline and Richmond Beach Libraries have joined with Third Place Books Read again this year, marking the 16th year of this community literary event. And we would like to extend special thanks to the King County Library System, the City of Lake Forest Park's Library Advisory Committee, Friends of the Shoreline, Richmond Beach, and Lake Forest Park Libraries, and the Lake Forest Park Shoreline Reads Committee. So on their behalf, and on behalf of Third Place Books, I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. As much as I miss having you all in the bookstore, it has been such a, oh, I'm seeing comments saying that there's no visuals. Hang on, let me try this one more time. How about now? Can you see me now? Okay, so some of you are seeing me fine. Okay, there we go. Wonderful. All right, I think it's working. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the input. So on their behalf, and on behalf of Third Place Books, I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight. As much as we missed having you in the bookstore, it has been such a delight to expand this virtual program and connect readers and authors in a virtual space. So thank you all so much for tuning in and for, of course, buying books. Your support is what makes all of this possible. So I will be linking books in chat all evening, so it'll be super easy to find them. For those of you in the Seattle area, come on in. All three of our locations are open, or if you can place an order online, or you can place an order online and come pick them up in store if you're local, or if you're not local, we of course do ship. And we are, once again, so grateful for your support. While you're over on our website, I definitely encourage you to check out some of our other upcoming events. We have an exciting roster coming up in the next few months, and if you'd like to stay in touch with our community, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's a weekly update about events and exciting releases and our online book clubs and blog posts. And of course, you can follow us on any of the major social media platforms. We even have a TikTok. We are at Third Place Books for the quickest updates and recommendations. And we're at Third Place Books Kids for the YA crowd. So we're going to be here for about an hour, and towards the end we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which we very much hope that you do, go ahead and leave those in the Q&A box, which should be either at the top or the bottom of your screen. It is different than the chat box, which I can see people have already discovered. The chat box is great for virtual applause and connecting with each other. We would love to hear where you're from or your favorite latest book, but when it comes time for questions, do make sure those end up in the Q&A so we can most easily find them. I'd like to remind everyone of our commitment to ensuring the safety and well-being of event attendees and guest authors. So in our chat and question spaces, please do lead with kindness and refrain from any inappropriate behavior or harassment. And finally, there are auto-generated closed captions available. From the menu at the top or bottom of your screen, select the live transcript button to enable or disable them. And I believe that is all of my housekeeping. So without further ado, I am so thrilled to introduce TJ Klune, the New York Times and USA Today bestselling Lambda Literary Award winner, author of The Extraordinaries, and of course the book of the evening, the much beloved House in the Cerulean Sea. This book was a New York Times, USA Today, and Washington Post bestseller, a 2021 Alex Award winner, the 2021 Rusa Reading List fantasy winner, an Indie Next Pick, and one of Book Riot's 20 most must-read feel-good fantasies. So many wonderful things have been said about The House in the Cerulean Sea, but Third Place bookseller Maggie said this book will make you laugh out loud while wrapping you in a warm hug with the story of finding love and healing with chosen family. Most recently, he's published the highly anticipated follow-up to The Extraordinaries, which is called Flash Fire, which Kirkus said is jam-packed with action, nefarious plots, romance, and puns. So I think we're all sold. And coming out in September, keep an eye out for Under the Whispering Door, about a man who discovers he's died and determines to live a lifetime in 7 days. In conversation tonight, I am so happy to welcome Seanan McGuire, the author of Hugo, Nebula, Alex, and Locus Award-winning Wayward Children series, the October Day series, the Encrypted series, and delightfully dark Middle Game, among many other works. She also writes comics for Marvel, darker fiction as Mary Grant, and younger fiction as A. Deborah Baker. She won the 2010 John W. Campbell Award for Best New Author, and in 2013 became the first person to appear 5 times on the same Hugo ballot. Thank you both so much for being here. I'm so excited to listen in. Oh, hello, Kat. Yes. Audience members, I will be listening for all of you. If anything comes up and you need me, give me a shout. And with that, I'm going to pass the stage off to our authors. So welcome, both of you.
Hi, thanks so much for having us. And thanks so much for everybody for joining us too. I see all y'all in the comments, but I'm going to get rid of those now so I don't get distracted.
I like how many people know my cat's name.
I know, I saw that too. Your cat's a celebrity.
She kind of is. It's her job, and she is very good at it.
She looks like she's very good at it. Mine is staring at me from the other side of the room because now is normally my bedtime because it is 10 o'clock at night where I'm at and she's not understanding what's going on, and so is my dog.
How dare you still be awake?
I know, right? For real.
So you're in
oh, poor me.
I know. You're in Virginia physiologically.
Yeah.
Are you in the range for Brood X?
For what?
Brood X. Did you get the big periodic cicada brood this year?
No, we got that like 2 years ago, but that was in Maryland and Pennsylvania this year. And for some reason, me and my friends decided we wanted to go to the Poconos, which is in the Pennsylvania mountains. And so I was driving up there, and my dog, no matter what temperature it is, has to have the back windows open so he can hang his head out the back of the car. And I was driving and I noticed that he was being awfully quiet in the back. So I turned around and he was pressed as far as he could in the corner of my car in the very, very back, hunched up together because there was a cicada sitting right in the middle of his bed in the back of the car.
Oh,
he wasn't sure what was going on. He didn't know what it was. And this is my 80-pound big scary dog who this little loud bug that's on his bed was terrifying him. So of course I had to pull over off the side of the freeway and get the bug out of there. And then the bug scared the crap out of me by flying into my face. So it was a very traumatic 5 minutes for the both of us. For
you and the bug?
And the dog. No, me and the dog. Screw the bug. Whatever. They sleep for 17 years. Then they come out of hiding, they have sex, and then they die. Whatever.
See, I love cicadas. I think they're just beautiful. I do, in part because I don't live where they are. So they
okay. But, let me tell you, when they come up out of the ground and you can go outside and you walk and it sounds like October with leaves crunching.
Crunch,
yeah, that's how it is.
So I accepted a guest slot at Balticon in Baltimore, Maryland this last year, specifically because it meant I would be in Baltimore during Brood X.
Oh my God.
And then because of COVID, the entire convention was virtual. That was really heartbreaking. Like, I have some cicada-based trauma that comes from not cicada in my car.
You can have all of them because I hate it. I hate it.
Okay, so we do have a comment in chat. We're 12 minutes into this review and no concept of a book talk has even begun, wasting my time.
Yeah. I wrote books. You also wrote books.
Yes, I have written so many books.
Yeah.
Because I don't sleep. I have no chill whatsoever. They did have me blurb The House in the Cerulean Sea, and I was a little bit dubious when they asked me if I would take a look at it for you. Because it looked like it was going to be middle grade. Yeah. And I am not a name or a blurb that really helps move a middle grade along. So I'm like, why are you asking me for this? And then I read it, and it's gorgeous, and it's very much not middle grade. I would hand it to a precocious 11-year-old, but I would not shelve it in that part of the bookstore. How did you manage to thread the line of using middle grade suitable language with themes that I would think were more suited to YA or adult and still be accessible to all three of those audiences?
Yeah, so honestly, when I first started writing it, it was not in my head that this would have any kind of crossover potential, because I'd never written any book that could be geared towards younger readers. That my series, The Extraordinaries, where the second book just came out a week ago, that was my YA debut. The Extraordinaries, the first book, when that came out last year, that was my YA debut. I had never written with children in mind. In fact, if you, as readers have discovered, that if you go through my back catalog, most of my books are geared towards adults because they have adult subject matter that could include violence, sex, or language, or anything like that. So I wasn't thinking in terms of children being able to read this book. What I was thinking about was how I felt when I was a kid reading cozy fantasy and how that made me feel. And specifically, I was thinking of Diana Wynne Jones and her amazing novels. One of the best, in my opinion, that she's written was Howl's Moving Castle, which many people have probably seen the animated film adaptation of. But if you've never read the books, especially Howl's Moving Castle, it is one of the most delightful fantasies ever. And it's not always happy, but it feels warm. It feels inviting. And we don't get to see that a lot in fantasy these days. Fantasies these days, and for good reason, because there's a huge audience for it, is grimdark. It is swords and shields and everybody's dying, or it's Game of Thrones. And that's how fantasy is. And I wanted to write a story where it wasn't about the darkness. It could be about a difficult subject matter, such as a discrimination that these kids face because of what they can do. But it was also about joy and hope and kindness above all else, because that was what I wanted to get a point across with this book, was that we need to remember kindness. We need to have kindness for others, for ourselves. And it's just something that I think we forgot. So I was writing this book not for one specific person in mind, but for anybody who wanted to read it.
Valid. I mean, the language really, I thought, was just an absolute masterclass in approachability. And you're right about the kindness. There's a reason, like, Ted Lasso has been the breakout star of
It's because A, it's an amazing show, and B, it is. People are talking about that show because of how wholesome it is, how kind it is. It's not something that you see on TV a whole lot.
Yeah, people are looking for kindness right now, and I think kindness is a very important thing. Now that you've pointed it out, I can honestly see the Diana Wynne Jones atmospheric connection. Though I would argue with you that Howl's Moving Castle is not her masterwork. That's fine.
Yeah.
Fire and Hemlock is the one that you need to reread 7 times to fully understand it. And while that is not a necessary component of being a master work, given how she had been getting more intricate and twisty with every passing book, I do kind of feel like that was the elevation. So we do have another comment in chat. Just wondering, is there going to be reading of the book, or is the focus on interviews? Nice to hear, but I have a reader here hoping to hear some reading. It's okay. We could just be misunderstanding the forum. If you would like to read, I am happy to mute myself while you do.
I can do a quick reading. I have a part picked out, but I would rather this be a conversation too, because it makes more sense for us to be able to converse back and forth. Yeah. But I would
as
be
a
happy.
Footnote, as a footnote, while you get to your excerpt, I am actively uncomfortable reading in front of people. I don't like to do it. I feel like because I don't have a single series right now that's not at least 5 books in, it's alienating to new readers because what the hell is she even talking about? And it's isolating to older readers because either I'm going back to the very beginning to help the new readers have accessibility, or I'm reading something that they have already seen. So I do not do that as a general rule, but I will mute and TJ will take it away.
Yeah. So one thing I want to stress too before I do this reading is that I am an author. I am not an audio narrator. We have audio narrators who, specifically Daniel Henning did the audiobook for this, and he did a tremendous job. He is these characters. If you have not heard the audio, and you've read the book and you would like to, you may be thinking about rereading it, I would highly suggest taking a chance on the audio, because Daniel Henning, it's not even really an audiobook. It feels like a theater production because of all the voices he does for the characters, and he's just absolutely marvelous. And that's just a long-winded way of me saying I'm not as good as somebody like Daniel Henning who does it for a living. So just keep that in mind. So in this scene, it happens partway towards the beginning of the book. The House in the Cerulean Sea, for those that don't know, is a story about a by-the-book caseworker named Linus Baker, who works for the department in charge of magical youth. He's essentially a social worker for magical children. These children are placed in government-run facilities called orphanages, and it's basically because the government is scared of what they're capable of. And it's Linus Baker's job to go and investigate these orphanages, and he is very good at what he does to a fault. And in this case, he's so good that his bosses decide to send him on a top secret assignment to a very specific island, to a very specific orphanage, where there are certain children there that are classified. And the children range from a garden gnome all the way up to the Antichrist himself. And they are overseen by the master of this orphanage, whose name is Arthur Parnassus. And this is a scene towards the beginning in between Linus and Arthur discussing the children. They're discussing one specific child as the conversation goes on, who is Chauncey, and Chauncey is my favorite. And that's why I always try to read something from him. Sal is our newest arrival, Mr. Parnassus said, as if Linus hadn't spoken at all. He sat across from Linus in the chair behind the desk, steepling his hands under his chin. 3 months ago. Oh? I suppose I did read that in his file. He seems nervous, though I suppose teenagers often are in the face of authority. Mr. Parnassus snorted. Nervous. That's one word for it. Did you also read in his file that these 3 months are the longest he's ever stayed in one place since he was 7 years old? No, I don't suppose I got that far. I was distracted by, well, the enormity of this assignment. Mr. Parnassus smiled sympathetically. They didn't tell you what you were walking into, did they? Extremely upper management, not until you got here. Linus fidgeted in his seat. No, only that it was classified. Also that the children were problematic, but Linus didn't know if he should say that out loud. Surely you can see why. I can, Linus agreed. One doesn't often meet the Antichrist. Mr. Parnassus looked at him sharply. We don't use that word here. I understand that you have a job to do, Mr. Baker, but I am the master of this house and you will abide by my rules. Is that clear? Linus nodded slowly. He hadn't expected to be rebuked so severely, especially by someone who exuded calm like the man sitting across from him. He had underestimated Mr. Parnassus. He would not make that mistake again. I meant no disrespect. Mr. Parnassus relaxed. No, I don't think you did. And how could you have known? You don't know him. You don't know us. You have the files, but they only tell you the basics, I'm sure. Mr. Baker, what's written in those files are nothing but bones, and we are more than just our bones, are we not? He paused, considering. Except for Chauncey, seeing as how he doesn't actually have any bones, though my point remains the same. What is he? Linus asked. Then, oh dear, that sounds rude. No offense intended. I've never seen someone like him before. I expect not, Mr. Parnassus said. He turned his head toward a stack of books to the right, eyes darting down the titles. He seemed to find the one he wanted about halfway down. He tapped the spine, forcing the edges out. The stack swayed. He pinched the cover of the book between two fingers and pulled it quickly. The book came out. The top half of the stack fell neatly in its place. He didn't seem to notice Linus gaping at him as he opened the book on his desk and began to flip through the pages. We aren't exactly sure what Chauncey is, or even really where he came from. A mystery, though I believe, aha, here we go. He turned the book toward Linus and tapped on the page. Linus leaned forward. Medusa zoa? That's a jellyfish. Correct, Mr. Parnassus said brightly. And I think that's part of it, at least. He doesn't sting, nor does he carry any kind of poison. There's possibly some sea cucumber in there as well, though it doesn't explain his appendages. It doesn't explain anything, Linus said, feeling rather helpless. Where did he come from? Mr. Parnassus pulled the book back as he closed it. No one knows, Mr. Baker. There are mysteries that may never be solved, no matter how hard we try. And if we spend too long trying to solve them, we may miss what's right in front of us. That's not how things work in the real world, Mr. Parnassus, Linus said. Everything has an explanation. There is a reason for all things. That's the opening line of rules and regulations for the department in charge of magical youth. Mr. Parnassus arched an eyebrow. The world is a weird and wonderful place. Why must we try to explain it all away? For our own personal satisfaction? No, because knowledge is power. Mr. Parnassus laughed. Ah, power, spoken like a true representative of Dacomi. Why am I not surprised you have the rule book memorized? You should know there's a chance that you'll find Chauncey under your bed at one point or another. That startled Linus. What? Why? Because for the longest time before he came here, he was called a monster, even by people who should know better. He was told the stories of monsters hiding under beds, whose calling in life was to frighten others. He thought that that was who he was supposed to be, that it was his job to scare people because it'd been ingrained in his head. That was all he was capable of. It wasn't until he came here that he realized he could be something more. So he chose to be a bellhop? Linus asked numbly. He did. He saw it in a film we watched some months back, and for whatever reason, he was entranced by the idea. But he'll never be able to... Linus stopped himself before the words could come out. But Mr. Parnassus knew exactly what he was going to say. He'll never be able to be a bellhop because what hotel would hire one such as him? So see, I would also hire him, people in the comments, because Chauncey is the best. He is literal sunshine, and I love his character so much. And I know that, especially with the idea of people having their favorite characters, I knew that Lucy, the Antichrist, was going to be the favorite of a lot of people, but Chauncey has and always will be my favorite.
Yeah, I appreciate Chauncey very much. And I do say that as someone with an active phobia of pudding. Like, I'm not kidding. I am afraid of viscous substances. So Chauncey should be my nightmare. And instead, I would be happy to have him working at my hotel.
And hugging you and putting his tentacles as he hugs you tightly, yes.
I think that Chauncey and I might have some issues once the hugging began.
Nah, he would just ask you for a tip no matter what he did. And that's what I love about characters like him, because they're, you know, when I was a kid, I was so singularly focused on wanting to be an archaeologist because of Indiana Jones. I was, you know, this was before I understood that I was queer, but I kind of figured I had a crush on Indiana Jones. So I wanted to be an archaeologist so bad. And then I saw the movie Aliens and then decided that, no, I wanted to be an astronaut archaeologist. And that was the thing I was going to be. And I was convinced, probably a little bit longer than I should have been, that I was going to be an astronaut archaeologist. So I just like the singular focus that kids have. And with like Chauncey, he wants to be a bellhop, so he is going to be a bellhop. Doesn't matter what anybody else says, that is his goal, and that's what he'll do.
Gold star to you for being the only person I have ever heard say I watched Aliens and decided to become an astronaut. That does not seem like a logical follow-on.
Yeah,
if you go to space, you will die horribly.
I was a weird kid. I was a very weird kid, so stuff like that didn't scare me. Now I get grossed out by all kinds of horror stuff. But when I was like 8, 9 years old, I was like, yeah, all right, Ripley.
That is the first movie that I can remember seeing is Alien, when I was far younger than I should have been to be allowed to see that movie.
So what do you got?
I got pretty much nothing. I tell everyone when they book me for stuff that I don't read. It makes me actively uncomfortable in a way that it is difficult to bounce back from. And I am out of topics of conversation, unfortunately. They have just been killed with a hammer.
Well, I can keep on going because I can talk about a whole bunch of stuff. So
Please do.
it was weird to get you to blurb this book because I like, you know, you're Seanan McGuire. You are you're like this legend, this titan of industry. And I remember my editor emailing me saying, so Seanan McGuire read your book and she kind of liked it. And then she blurbed it. And I was like, I remember instantly, like when I get like super excited, but also extremely nervous, I break out in flop sweat. And when they sent the email with your blurb, I was just like flop sweat. I was just instantly covered in flop sweat. And it was because you were the first blurb for the book before it came out. And
yeah, that's what we said.
Yeah, I was just blown away that my first book with a major publisher would just be someone of your caliber reading it. And I don't know if I've ever even actually thanked you face to face for that. Thank you for doing that. Thank you,
are very welcome.
Giving us a chance. Because I know you're very busy. And and I know, I mean, I'm in a position now where I get to read books early, to blurb books. And I know how difficult that can be with your time, and you take it, you know, you sometimes have to say no. So thank you for taking a chance on my book. That is absolutely wonderful of you to do.
I will take a chance on pretty much anything I'm handed. My only rule is that if I don't like it, I will never say anything, because that is not my place. I can dislike it once it's out. But if somebody's like, hey, will you read this early? Okay, you're going to get an honest opinion. The honest opinion may be, I'm sorry, I did not have time to read that. Please believe me, I never lie. But, you know, you will get an honest opinion. It was easier to blurb before the current Panini, because I would just take books with me on the airplane. And now we can't do that. We do have folks now dropping their questions into chat. Please, if you have a question for TJ, myself, or both, put that into the Q&A section, and we will be getting to those in approximately 15 minutes. That way they don't scroll past and get lost forever in the morass of chatness.
So while we have the 15 minutes left, I do want to touch on a couple of other things, if you don't mind, if that's all right with you. So what I want to do is I want to talk about this book for a little bit. This book is Under the Whispering Door. This comes out in September. Under the Whispering Door, you can see that they have similar covers. They were done by the same cover artist, Chris Sickles with Red Nose Studios, and he is one of the absolute best. But just because his books look similar, they are not. These are not books set in the same universe. They're not set in the same world. Here's what I'll say. House in the Cerulean Sea, I was told by many, many people, especially after the year we've all lived through, the last 15, 16 months and change, that this book felt like a hug. That this was the cozy, the happiness that people needed in order to get through a really difficult time. Under the Whispering Door is not that book. This is a book that deals with grief, that deals with a different side of kindness. Whereas The House in the Cerulean Sea was about showing kindness to others, Under the Whispering Door is about something a little bit more difficult, and that's being kind to yourself. In this book, the book opens with the man Wallace Price, the narrator, who is not a very good man at all. He is a partner in his law firm. His name is on the masthead, and he thinks that he is the top dog, and he lives a very self-centered and very selfish life. In the very opening chapter, he is firing one of his long-term employees for making a very simple mistake. And he's the type of person that believes when a part in a machine breaks down, it's better to replace the part than to fix it. And then he dies at the end of the very first chapter. And what should be an ending is not an ending at all. It's the beginning of something else entirely, because at his poorly attended funeral, he meets a woman who calls herself a reaper. And it's her job to take him to Hugo. And Hugo is the owner of a tea shop, a very strange tea shop in the middle of the woods. But that is not his only job. Hugo's job is to act as a ferryman, to lay souls to rest. And when Wallace gets to this place, he's sure there's been some mistake. And so he refuses to cross over. And what follows is Wallace learning that the life that he led, his very self-centered, selfish life, was not a life at all. And that he decides that in the time that he has left, that he wants to try to become a better person. And with that, he finds himself growing closer to Hugo, but Hugo is alive and Wallace is not. So what hope could they have for any sort of future together? And this book, it is, I'm calling it my unofficial kindness trilogy, which House in the Cerulean Sea was first, Under the Whispering Door second, because it is about being kind to yourself. And it is also about something very difficult. Is it possible to grieve for yourself, to grieve for a life that you wasted, of opportunities and chances that you've just glossed over because you thought you were doing the right thing? And it's also about accountability, taking responsibility for the type of person you were and trying to make it better. And it's also about ghosts. And it is what I pitched to my publisher. We called it a comedy about grief. And that raised a few eyebrows when I pitched that to them. But this book is, I think when Cerulean was the hug we all needed last year, this book is going to be the shoulder that we can cry on, because I think that we have a lot of unrepressed grief and trauma over what has happened to us over the last 16 months. I don't know that we've properly dealt with that, especially people who've lost others due to the pandemic. And I think that while I wish this world was in a much different place than it is right now, I think that both Cerulean and this book came out exactly when they're supposed to. And I'm so excited for people to read about my ghosts in my tea shop and hopefully learn stuff and ask themselves questions about what kind of life they're leading and if this is the life that they want. And if they were to leave this place tomorrow, would they have left the mark that they wanted to leave? And I think that's a very important question that we don't often ask ourselves because it's very scary. Like, what mark do we leave on this world? Like, are my books my mark? Are my friends, my family, the people that make me happy my mark? Is it material things? Is it an idea? Is it doing good for others and expecting nothing in return? I think about that a lot because I don't know the answer, and I don't know that anybody living does. And I'm always curious about what happens when we go. I don't know the answer, but I'll find out one day.
I guess that is the inherent reality of mortality.
Right. And I don't know. It's grief is a complicated thing to write about because everybody experiences grief differently. What's true for one person won't be true for somebody else. And people who have not necessarily experienced deep grief might not understand the emotions and the feelings or the actions of people who are in the throes of it or who have been through it. But from what I've learned in my almost 40 years on this earth is that if you live long enough to learn what love is, you'll know what loss is eventually. You will know what it means to lose someone or something that you care about. It could be a friend, it could be a partner, it could be a family member, or even the loss of a pet is akin to losing somebody, that you love desperately. And I think a lot about legacies and what it means. And I think now more than ever, we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be a good person? Or not even a good person, what does it mean or what would it take to be a better person? It doesn't even need to be a monumental change. I've told myself for a while now that if I can just be a little bit better than the day I was before, then maybe I'm doing okay. I don't always succeed, but I don't stop trying because it can be really hard to do something like that. It can be really hard to better yourself because I wasn't always like I am right now. I used to be very cynical. I used to be almost militant about it. I was a very cynical type of person. And unfortunately, it took losing someone I cared for very much to see that that is not the way I wanted to live for the rest of my life. And Under the Whispering Door is the last part of my grief over losing that wonderful man. And I poured all of the pieces of my broken heart and chipped soul into this book, because I knew that out there in this world, there were others out there who might have felt something like I did. And grief can be overwhelming. It can be all consuming, but it can also be cathartic, and it can also be selfish. But there is that okay in that selfishness, because when you think about when somebody leaves us, we think, yes, why did they have to leave? Why can't I ever see them again? But we also think, why did this have to happen to me? Why can't I get some kind of happy ending like everybody else gets? And I think that's okay to feel that way. I think it really is. And this is just basically a long-winded way of me saying that I don't have all the answers, and I don't know anybody that does, but under the whispering door is me wishing this is what could happen when we close our eyes for the last time. And I don't know what that will be. I don't know if we close our eyes and that's it, and we're all just smoke from a blown out candle, or if maybe we'll find a door and we'll be able to walk through that door and see something magical.
Well, valid. The question that I got asked when I did a book on ghosts was, do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe in anything like that?
I do, but then let me preface that when I say stuff like that, because here I just gave what I hope was a slightly eloquent talk about my own personal grief and whatnot. But I believe in a lot of crap that's probably not real. Like, I totally believe in like Bigfoot and all sorts of cryptids. I believe in UFOs and all that kind of stuff. Ghosts, I do because when I was a kid, my father died in an accident, and I was 6 years old. And I was convinced the day after his funeral that he was there at the edge of my bed. And most likely I was dreaming. Most likely I wasn't actually seeing anything, or maybe it was just a product of my brain, my 6-year-old brain wanting to see something so real that it just manifested in front of me. But there is part of me that thinks that was my dad checking in on me, making sure I was okay, because he couldn't be there in person to do it anymore. So yeah, I believe in ghosts. I believe that they're not necessarily the Hollywood scary monster kind of ghosts, or maybe those are real. I think that some version of a ghost is either a lingering trace of them, or maybe even just a memory, because memories are so powerful. They are so powerful. And I think that they can manifest themselves in certain ways. And if that was my dad, then I hope that he saw that I was going to be okay, and that he got to go through whatever door, go through wherever he was going to go after that. And I think that is, yeah, so that's my belief. Yeah, I believe in ghosts.
I mean, Adam Duretz from The Counting Crows really, I think, put it best when he said, if dreams are like movies, then memories are films about ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah, and that is wonderful to put it that way, because that's what it is. Our memories, when we lose someone or something like a pet, anything like that, the memories are all we have left of them. And I think about that a lot, because memories fade. They do. And I remember when I was 16, 17 years old, I came to this weird, startling realization that I couldn't remember what my dad sounded like. I couldn't remember what my father sounded like. And that knocked me out for days. And I think it's important that we allow ourselves to have those moments of anger and feeling like the world is ending, so long as we don't let it become all we know. It feels like it when you're in the middle of it. But as soon as you get to a point where it doesn't stab you as much as it did before, maybe one day you'll be able to find that memory that can make you smile. Like right now with the passing of my partner a few years ago, I was in a toxic place. I was in this pit, this hellhole, and I remember the first time something made me laugh, and I felt so guilty over it because I felt like I shouldn't be laughing. But then I thought, he would want me to be laughing. He'd want me to be laughing over something like this. So I know grief, and chances are people watching do too, and I'm sorry for that. But there is power, as you said, there is power in memory, and memories can become our ghosts, but sometimes it's okay to be haunted.
So we are at 7:43 and you've got 17 questions built up. Do you want to read those? Do you want me to read them to you? What is your plan here?
I can look through some of them and see what's going on.
Okay, go ahead and take what you want.
Under the Whispering Door, due on September, has a similar cover. Nope, we already got that. No, they are not connected. Do you, the author, have any input on the choice of narrator? Yes, sometimes. Well, yeah, I get the final say. Like they'll bring me some narrators to listen to auditions, and then I get to be the one to pick who I wanted. And I'd never worked with Daniel Henning before, but when I heard his audition, I specifically heard his Chauncey voice. I was like, yep, that's it. He's Chauncey. And so again, I would recommend everyone go listen to the audio because he did a freaking tremendous job. Did you dream up any students who didn't make it into the final edit of Cerulean Sea? Yes, I did. David was actually going to have a much bigger part, but then it felt a little too crowded. If you remember, for those who've read it, David is a child that's mentioned at the end as a possible new addition to this school. But it felt too crowded, and I didn't want to take away from the other kids who were already there. Cerulean Sea was so cozy and atmospheric. Thank you. Do you recommend any writing exercises to build your atmosphere aesthetic? Ooh. Shannon, do you do writing exercises at all, ever?
I mean, honestly, I don't have time. The only way I can, you said I was a titan. I have literally been publishing for 10 years, almost exactly. Mm-hmm. Literally, the only way I can have as many books out as I do is that I never stop. Stopping is for other people. So my closest thing to a writing exercise is dice. I will literally use dice to just track word count. Writing exercises are good and useful, but they do not assist me in getting a book out.
Yeah, for me, Courtney, thank you for the question. I don't necessarily do writing exercises either. Instead, I immerse myself in the aesthetic of the world that I'm writing. For House on the Cerulean Sea, for instance, I watched a lot of Studio Ghibli movies because I love the way that those are animated. I love Tim Burton aesthetic, and I listen to a lot. If you've read the book, you know that there is a lot of references to music in the book, specifically music from the 50s and the 60s. And I listened to a lot of that music, A, because I loved it, and B, because it was an integral part of the book. So I don't necessarily do writing exercises, but I kind of immerse myself into the world. From Annie, where did the idea of writing a gnome come from? See, I know that everybody wants like complicated stories for each, like how I thought up of this, but literally I just got the idea from seeing a garden gnome in somebody's garden, and I just like the idea. I like how they look. Like some of them can look slightly ominous and some of them can look very happy. But I had this idea when I saw the garden gnome of, oh, what if it was a girl garden gnome, but she still had her beard, and that was just totally normal and nobody cared about it. So that's kind of where she came from. TJ, on the subject of Alien, have you read Alien Echo? No, but that sounds like it would be right up my alley. Totally drop the link if somebody has it in the chat to do that.
And what was not mentioned is I wrote that.
Oh.
So, it was actually great. It's a Mira Grant joint, so it's a little bit more gory than a Shannon tends to be.
That's hysterical.
And they asked, hey, do you want to write the first ever Alien YA tie-in novel? it has to have lesbians. And I'm like, well,
yay, space lesbians.
I can do that. And there's 2 of them. So that's really important to me. And what was magical was literally they announced Mira Grant is writing the first YA alien book. And the same day I got accused by about 15 people of killing the franchise. So my powers are greater than I ever dreamt they might be. I can kill a franchise without writing a single book. It was not done yet at that point in time. So I have magic powers. But yes, it is lesbians in space, and also you have permission to set up an entire binome as long as you break it. And I found out last week that some of the creatures I created for the planet Zagreus, which was a much more obscure reference before Hades came out last year, some of the creatures that I created for that planet have shown up in the Alien RPG since then. So hey.
Man, you better be getting some residuals for that.
That is not how tie-in work that is not how tie-in work works, sadly, but I don't care because I have touched the Alien franchise and it's not getting untouched anytime soon.
Seanan, any spoilers? Anyone wants to know any spoilers for Drowned Girls adoring this series?
I'm really glad you're having a good time with it. I am literally not allowed to say the titles of the books until my publisher has announced them. Mm-hmm. So I think if I gave you any spoilers, my editor would stop sending me cheese from England as a punishment. And I like cheese. Like, I don't think people fully comprehend how much I like cheese. So the only spoiler I can really give you is that Cora is involved. It is an odd numbered book, meaning it takes place in the school timeline. So it is moving forward from Every Hearted Doorway rather than being one of the flashback books. So it takes place after Come Tumbling Down, and it does center largely on Cora. And we'll get to see the second school. The Whitethorn Institute is a key component.
Awesome. And speaking of not being able to talk much about stuff, the next question, when can we expect the third Extraordinaries book? That comes out next summer. And it's the third and final book in the trilogy after The Extraordinaries and Flashfire. And I cannot tell the title because I too will get in trouble if I say anything about that. But yes, it is already written and it is ready to go. We just need to actually do the whole editing thing. Andrea, I really like the children in the book. They are also different and have such cool powers. Whose magical abilities appeal to you the most? The Antichrist. I mean, come on. Lucy, my version of the Antichrist is a fun little kid, and I'd totally be happy having his powers. Seanan and TJ, what are you reading currently? I am reading, and I've been in this for a while. I am currently reading The Great Mortality by John Kelly, which is a history about the Black Death, the bubonic plague. And I listened to a podcast series about the bubonic plague. And when I find something interesting, because of my ADHD, I tend to hyper focus. So they use this book as a reference to build their show. So I went out and got the book and I'm reading through it, and it is gross, but it is also fascinating. And I'm not even normally a history guy. I just love stuff that I don't know about. And like for the bubonic plague, there's this thing where England was totally the plague had made its way to England, and they were all getting sick and everybody was dying. So Scotland, awesome Scotland, who had not suffered the plague in any way, shape, or form, thought, we're going to go and we're going to attack them and try to take all of England because they're weakened, they are dying. And then they got to the border, and before they attacked even one time, fleas made the jump from England to the Scottish soldiers, and they all got the bubonic plague. So they went, and that's how the plague came to Scotland, because they wanted to attack England. What are you reading?
I mean, who doesn't really?
Yeah, right.
When you finish that, you should take a look at The Return of the Black Death, the world's greatest serial killer, which is a study of epidemiological archaeology and anthropology behind the Black Death in England.
I will absolutely do that too, because right now I'm getting to a point in it where it's talking about the rise of anti-Semitism because of the Black Plague. And again, it's something I had never heard of before when it came to the Black Plague. So I am absolutely fascinated by it.
The Black Death is a special interest of mine, to the point that that's inroads with the CDC. I am currently reading Road of Bones by Christopher Golden, which will be out when does this actually come out? I don't know. It comes out eventually. Christopher Golden is a delight, and
he's a great horror author. He's got a bunch of good books.
Oh yeah, he's a big old horror author. I love this cover. This cover is a beautiful example of, you don't really need to state the genre of the book. If this were anything other than horror, I would be direly disappointed in this book.
It's good though.
January. It comes out in January.
Awesome. Will there be an audio version of Under the Whispering Door? Yes, it is being recorded by Kurt Graves. He is the narrator from my Green Creek series, and he will be doing the audio. It'll be released same day. John asks, Ace person here. Hi, John, who is an Ace person. I am also Ace. That's awesome. Do you both feel responsibility to write queer characters in your stories, or is it something that comes naturally? All of my books are about queer people from all walks of life. All of my books in the future will be about queer people from all walks of life. And when I say that, I mean the queer characters will be the main characters. There will be straight characters in them, but they will always take a side role to the queer characters. And the reason I do that is because I want to write books for people like me. They can be read by anyone who wants to read them, but when I write a book, I'm thinking about queer people who haven't always been able to see themselves in books.
I feel like it's both a responsibility and something that comes fairly naturally. You know, I started publishing in 2009, which was not long ago, but was forever ago in terms of queer representation in science fiction and fantasy. When I first started, it was impossible to get a queer character into a book that was not about queer issues. I have a very accepting editor at DAW. I love everyone there, but it was made reasonably clear to me without anyone ever saying it that everybody needed to be straight until people knew who I was. And that's not the case anymore, which is magical. But I feel like you do have a responsibility to a certain degree to turn the mirror toward the people that never get to see themselves reflected, because seeing people in stories is literally how humans learn empathy. We know that. That has been proven sociologically again and again and again. If all the stories you see are about straight white men, those are the people you will be best equipped to empathize with. And it doesn't matter if you're not a straight white man, because again, we see that in children of color, in girl children, in people whose gender does not fit into the binary categories, that have more difficulty empathizing with themselves and with people like them than they do with the straight white men that are presented to them in every single walk of life. If TJ and I both write 100 more books before we die, and neither one of us ever includes another straight white man in a single book that we write, it will not be enough to perceptibly dilute the number of that character that are not only already available to you, because nothing we do changes a word in the thing that's already been written, but in the books that are going to keep coming out. There are more straight white men, even today, published in any genre you want to name, other than maybe lesbian romance, than there are any other type of characters. So we do have a certain responsibility. Now, that said, there are still few enough characters of a lot of identity types that if you kill one, you are killing 80% of the representation that group has.
Exactly.
And I am a murderous author. I like to kill people. I kill people.
I don't. I do not.
I'm sorry. That is my job. You are here to be murdered. Like, straight up. So I do sometimes, I literally have sometimes turned characters straight so that I could drop a building on them.
There you go.
Without getting yelled at. It's the opposite of bury your gays. If you know they need to die for plot reasons, they're a straight person.
In all seriousness, though, the bury your gays trope and fridging lesbians is still in 2021 a huge problem, and not just in books, but in film and in television. Obviously, I have no power over all of media, but if I did, I would say, stop it.
Yeah.
Stop it. Stop making queers suffer for ratings or for sales or whatever. That is not, we are allowed to be happy. We are allowed to be celebrated. We are allowed to live our lives free from that kind of crap always following us around. And the reason I write queer characters. And the reason I put queer focus on my books is A, because yes, I'm queer, but B, I never got to see that when I was a kid. I never got to read books where people like me got to have a happy ending. If I was in a book, I was the offensive sidekick, or I was getting sick and dying, or I was getting beat up or killed to teach the straights a very valuable lesson. Screw that. I'm done being the very valuable lesson. I'm going to be the creator of my own worlds. And when my worlds, queer people get to be happy all the time. Maybe not all the time. Sometimes they can be sad. But at the end of it, they will be happy, because that's what life should be like for us.
Yeah. I mean, in none of my worlds is everyone going to be happy forever. Again, I like the murder. So I would like Bury Your Gaze to stop so that I can kill more people. Come on. If all y'all straight people could just stop killing your only load-bearing lesbian, you know, stop taking out the queer characters when they are 2% of your world, I would be able to up the queerness of my books from 60% to 90% and not worry that I was putting plot armor on everyone. I just want to kill people.
Now I want you to write a book called Load Bearing Lesbian. But you know what? That title has different connotations than I think it should.
It really does, says the lesbian in this conversation. So I don't write enough erotica for that to be an appropriate book title for me.
So. I don't know how to write lesbian erotica. So I guess somebody in the world write lesbian erotica and call it Load Bearing Lesbian. That's all I'm asking, please. And then dedicate it to Shannon because it was her idea. Okay. Let's see. I'll have time for one more question. And I see a bunch of them are asking about the third book in the kindness trilogy that I talked about. I can't talk about the title. I can't talk about it. All I can say is it'll come out fall of 2022. And it is a queer retelling of Carlo Collodi's Pinocchio. And this kind of kindness, where Cerulean was being kind to others, Under the Whispering Doors being kind to yourself. This last book in my unofficial kindness trilogy asks if it's possible to be kind to people who don't deserve it. If people did something so terrible, could you still find it in your heart to forgive them? And I can't say what that terrible thing is because it kind of spoils the entire book, but it is a book about hope. It is a book about joy. And there is a sentient Roomba vacuum named Rambo who will who will, I guarantee people are going to adore my Roomba vacuum named Rambo, who is slightly neurotic, but he loves picking up trash. That was good. That was amazing. That was wonderful. I'm so happy that we got to have this conversation. And look, it's 11 o'clock. Well, it's 11 o'clock for me.
You get to go to bed.
I get to go to bed. And I'm so happy about this. Hi, Third Place Books again. Hello.
Hello, I'm back. Hello, everyone. I'm back. It's kind of bittersweet because it's time to wrap up our evening, I'm afraid. So I'm just going to take this last couple of moments to say thank you. Thank you to our authors who came and shared with us. I think I definitely hugely appreciate it, and I'm seeing the chat explode right now. So I think we can safely say we all hugely appreciate it. For all of you who would like to get your hands on a copy of any of these books, I'm going to go ahead and throw fresh links because I know they've been buried by now. So go ahead and chase those down and give me just a second. TJ and Shannon, thank you so much for being here. I have someone in the comments said, this is an anonymous viewer, said, not a question. I just wanted to thank TJ for sharing intimate pieces of himself through his works. I appreciate his bravery in his vulnerability and taking on hard topics like grief, oppression, and authenticity in his books. TJ, you were a gift. Thank you. And I think we can all sort of agree with those words. And I think that with that, it is time to close out our evening.
Thank you so much for having us, Shauna. It is a delight to see you as always. And thank you so much for, you basically helped my career get to where it is. So thank you so much for thank you so much for letting me get to this point. I really appreciate you so much. You have no idea.
I kind of do, because Tanya Huff did much the same thing for me.
Okay, then I will
You know.
I will do my best to pass it along, because like I said before, when I got the news that you had blurbed the book, it was literally one of the best days of my life. So thank you so much for
Oh.
doing that. I really appreciate you. Just
Thank you. I really appreciate your books. They make me happy. You also make me happy when we get to interact. We just don't do that very often.
I know, we need to do it more. But okay, now it is for real my bedtime.
Go to bed.
So,
All right, shall we let the awkward waving commence?
okay, goodbye. Awkward
Good night,
ladies.
everyone. Thank you,
Good night.
thank you, thank you.